So I kind of want to talk about, I guess, some things I don't normally talk about, just because I don't know. In case people wonder why I don't talk about them that much, and I guess we'll start with role playing games actually that I don't talk about much. Pathfinder is an interesting role playing game and was significant after fourth edition because I guess you know Wizards of the Coast didn't give people what they wanted in you know the the fantasy RPG setting that they wanted, and Pathfinder seemed to fulfill that role, at least continue on from where third edition left off in a way that fourth edition didn't. And then when fifth edition came out, it kind of eclipsed Pathfinder. And Pathfinder did have their second edition, and people were interested in it, and it did sell quite well. I actually picked up a copy of Pathfinder second edition at Gen Con when it was released in 2019, and I have that, whatever the special edition cover. And then there was a humble bundle that had physical books, and one of which was this Pathfinder second edition book. So I actually have two copies: I guess the regular edition and the 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 Gen Con release edition, which are essentially the same. The cover just has the colors reversed on the hardcover. So I'm not as familiar with Pathfinder, but I have played some Starfinder, and I find it to be a good system. It's just that for me, if I'm going to play fantasy role playing, which is generally speaking the most likely kind of role playing I want to do, I'm just going to play Dungeons and Dragons. The chances of me playing Pathfinder would be limited to someone else is running a Pathfinder game, and there isn't a Dungeons and Dragons game, so therefore I'll play a Pathfinder game. I have no issues with the Pathfinder system itself, and Starfinder is a great alternative to Dungeons and Dragons because it's not a fantasy medieval fantasy role playing game. It's a space fantasy role playing game, which leads us to, I guess, the Star Wars role playing game. I played it like a small campaign in the 90s with a friend. I created a character that was basically a copy of Garrick from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and he had an entire fashion empire. So I put all my points or whatever, my character building, into wealth and made him a wealthy businessman. And then myself and my friend, the GM, decided that it would be funny if his head office had been on Alderaan and he'd actually been way more wealthy beforehand, which would give him the motivation to, go after the Empire, right? So that's my knowledge of the Star Wars, and obviously they're on a different edition now that isn't the same as the stuff in the 90s. And I would play Star Wars, but I don't know. I think there's an issue with the Jedi. I think, from what I understand, they handle the Jedi sort of okay. Like, if you start doing dark side things, then you lose your character, which is, not necessarily the best, but at least it keeps people from becoming way more powerful than their peers. But I still think that there would be an imbalance with people playing Jedi and non-Jedi characters. Although, if you're looking to, role play and simulate Star Wars and tell a Star Wars story, then I guess that's what you want to do. But I have this sort of issue with things that already have a story attached to them, right? And you feel like you're either less than the protagonist of whatever story was originally there, or you are, overturning whatever happened. You become even greater than them. It just seems a little weird to me. That's kind of why I never got around to playing Dragonlance campaigns, and probably wouldn't, even though I love Dragonlance. It's one of my favorite settings in Dungeons and Dragons, and it's also my favorite role-playing game. So I think that Star Wars has that same kind of limitation. Cthulhu is interesting. The horror stuff, is somewhat interesting, and the, unfathomable space gods and that kind of stuff, like the stories are interesting, but I'm not sure I feel like role playing it. Shadowrun, I've always kind of wanted to play Shadowrun, but never got around to it. But it is something I would play. Cyberpunk, I have played a little bit of Cyberpunk, around about a slightly less than I played of Vampire the Masquerade. I like Vampire the Masquerade. I like Cyberpunk. I just don't have access to a Vampire the Masquerade game or any of that World of Darkness stuff. I actually really like Changeling. That was probably my favorite. But Cyberpunk is pretty cool, and I would, if I had time, I would definitely play Cyberpunk. There's Ryan at my store, Kyle at my store runs a Cyberpunk campaign with a bunch of people, and I sometimes dip in and watch it, and it's great. And again, if I had time when they're playing it, I would join in, but sometimes I just don't. So I think that's it. Like, there's other role-playing games, there's lots of other ones, especially the creator-driven role-playing games. I guess, especially now with Critical Role's Daggerheart and Matt Colville's Draw Steel, those are huge. But even lots of other YouTubers and I guess Twitch streamers and other influencers in the gaming space have had their own little Kickstarters and, brought new things to either enhance 5th edition or a completely different system entirely. And I applaud them for doing it. I'm not sure how much I'm all that interested. The one I would probably be most likely to check out, which I never got around to, was Runehammer's, just because I really enjoyed his videos, and I think that regardless of whether I used his system, there'd be interesting ideas in there that I'd want to check out. So I'm just, again, I have one fantasy role-playing game, and that's Dungeons & Dragons, and that covers medieval fantasy. And I guess Starfinder covers space fantasy, and Cyberpunk covers, 90s futuristic sci-fi, and Shadowrun covers the fantasy version of that, and, Star Wars would cover Star Wars. And, I really loved DC Heroes. DC Heroes was great, and that would cover the superhero itch, and I never really liked any of the Marvel games. And Champions I tried, but I still preferred DC Heroes. But overall, my favorite role-playing game, which I played a lot of in the 90s, haven't since, but would again, is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangers. Hands down, that's my favorite role-playing game system. Palladium did some really good books, and I did like their system. Maybe not more than Dungeons & Dragons, but about equal. So there's that. For the collectible card games, I guess Yu-Gi-Oh! I almost never talk about because I don't really understand Yu-Gi-Oh! Plus, when I look at the cards, I don't see anything that entices me other than they look like the 90s. It's like Yu-Gi-Oh! Never updated, whereas Magic the Gathering and Pokemon, they did update. They brought themselves into the modern era, whereas Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just happy staying in the same state that it was when it came out. Which, if that's what people that are fans of Yu-Gi-Oh! Are looking for, well, then they got it, and it's just not something that I'm interested in. And maybe it's the anime of it all, which is kind of why I also don't talk about Weiss Schwarz and I'm not really that interested in anything Weiss Schwarz. I don't have anything against it. It's just, it's not for me, and I don't really understand it because, I've never been all that into things that have, 1,000 points or 3,000 points or, whatever their power levels are just in the thousands instead of. I just prefer low numbers, and I'm not sure if that's rational in any way. It's just what I prefer. So, Weiss Schwarz is not something I'm interested in. And Force of Will was something I also wasn't interested in, even though I did buy a couple of boxes that I have in a storage closet somewhere that maybe one day I'll crack open. But that was more for the memes, for the, watching Alpha Investments and him talking about Force of Will all the time. And they happened to be dumped at a local store years ago, so I picked up a bunch of it and never had any desire to open it. So also in that vein, I guess, is One Piece. I don't understand One Piece. I watched some clips of the live action Netflix thing, and it did not look appealing at all. And I've seen, some small clips of the animated thing, and again, not appealing at all. So I don't find the game appealing at all, and also the difficulty of getting it at first when I first opened the store. That's basically when One Piece came out, and it was non-existent. And yes, people ask about it in a way that nobody asks about most of the other collectible card games that I don't carry in the store. But I would carry One Piece, at least a few boxes here and there, but it's always been difficult to get. And then I've just completely forgot about pre-ordering it. Someone basically has to remind me, hey, I want this set, can you pre-order it? And they got to do that months in advance, or else I'm probably not going to, because I don't really care enough about One Piece. And not enough people ask about it for me to care. So One Piece is something that I understand. It's very popular and people really like it, and I'm in the minority, but it's just something I'm not all that interested in. And then there's also Star Wars Unlimited, which is sort of on the opposite end of the scale. I want nothing to do with anything that's a Star Wars collectible card game. I was around in the 90s. There was a Star Wars collectible card game then. There was a Star Trek one. There were all kinds of collectible card games. And the ones that failed the most were the ones that were tied to IPs, right? Especially Star Wars. I mean, how many collectible card games have there been for Star Wars? Are we on 5 or are we on 3? I don't even know. They just come and they go, because I don't think it's sustainable at all. No one's ever asked me for Star Wars, and I've never had any inclination to order it. If someone asked and wanted me to bring in Star Wars, sure, I'd bring in Star Wars. There's also Keyforge. Keyforge was interesting to me, and I do have some Keyforge from when it first came out, and I always wanted to play it, never got around to it. Probably will someday. I have at least a friend or two that are interested in Keyforge, but no one in the store ever asks about it, so I don't order it. MetaZoo, I order it for the memes, because it was talked about a lot across the collectible card YouTube space, and obviously Alpha Investments talked about it a lot. So I'm interested in both the original MetaZoo and the new MetaZoo, but not to any degree in which I say I'm a fan of it. Just, I like the idea that it exists, and that it failed, and now it exists again, right? And that Richard Garfield and someone from Pokemon are attached to it, great. I like the story of MetaZoo more than I like MetaZoo itself. I'm not that I'm interested in cryptids, but not in a cryptid collectible card game. So, what other collectible card games are out there that, I mean, I carry Lorcana. I'm not particularly interested in Lorcana. I do like Disney, but I don't particularly like the game. Flesh and Blood, I like the game. It's really, really good. I like bringing it in. There's really only one person that ever buys it. Maybe 2 people, and sometimes a third person, maybe. But I'm going to keep carrying Flesh and Blood because I think that it's pretty great, and that if someone isn't interested in Magic the Gathering, or is even more competitive, like a really competitive person, needs to get into Flesh and Blood. And I carry it, even though I don't necessarily play it. I would play it if I had time, but I mostly just, if I do have time, I play Magic the Gathering because that's what mostly people are playing at the store. But those are some of the collectible card games that people talk about online that I don't ever get around to talking about, and probably I will mention. And I guess in the case of MetaZoo, I'll still do box openings, but I'm not going to be bringing in Star Wars to do box openings unless, I mean, they've been on sale, and I still haven't bothered to buy any of the massive discounted product from distribution. But maybe one box, bring it in, open it up, because I mean, I do like Star Wars, right? So I'm not opposed to bringing in the stuff and opening it. I forget about it because I just don't care about it enough. So anyway, are there games out there that people talk about a lot, whether it's they have the dedicated space of this YouTuber talks about this game all the time, or I'm talking about specifically like a YouTuber that talks about games in general, and people talk about this game and mention this game a lot that you have no real interest in? Let me know in the comments below. Have a good day.